Yes, it's now saying recording on this computer. Can everybody, thank you very much for that. I forget who it was. Can you see anybody at the bottom of your screen? It should say recording. We didn't need to record the first part.
Yes, it's recording now.
Okay, good.
Yeah, it's
All right. Thank you very, very much. I don't have a mouse. See, that's another thing. I don't have a mouse on this laptop. It's a really old laptop. All right, we are going to now go to screen share and get started with today's lecture, which I think you're going to find very interesting. And anyway, there's at least 3 slides on this list, which could be, which won't be, sorry, removed from the study list. And I will tell you when we get to those, and whenever throughout the semester, there's a slide, let's say, so important that I don't ever remove them from the study list, I will give you a heads up, and you choose how you want to do this, but I would recommend you mark next to, in the margin or somewhere at the top of those notes for that slide, something, a symbol to let you know, oh, I really should make sure I study this one particularly closely. That's not more than, less than half of the slides I show. I say that about. And when we do the review, don't forget it's in the syllabus, right? The week before the midterm and again before the final, we will cut the list down by at least 40%. So now you should have, as always, we covered this now it's the 3rd meeting, right, that we've talked about how you should take notes. So you should have your syllabus in front of you, of course, for week 2, and also the list of terms to know, because there are 4 terms that we're going to cover today, and 3 of them are short. One of them is a little bit longer. Okay, here we go. This is the first must-know slide. It's a very important one. I won't be cutting it from the study list. Okay, here we go. The name is 2 words, Merode Altarpiece. And again, I always spell the word just once. First word, Merode, it's a town in Belgium. M-E-R-O-D-E. And then altarpiece is 1 word, A-L-T-A-R piece. Altarpiece is the title, 2nd word. The artist's last name is Campen, C-A-M-P-I-N, and the date is 1425. Remember, this is an open book, open note class in terms of the midterm and the final, but you still have to study to get a good grade. Okay, what are we looking at? Well, let's start with the fact that it's a particular kind of painting called a triptych. So let me give you that definition. You see it's on the list. I'm starting with that first, even though Renaissance is higher on the list of the first page of terms, because that's what we're looking at. We're looking at a triptych, and I don't need to spell those words. They're right there on that list where you should write down, of course, in the space between this and the next term, the definition. Here we go. A triptych is a painting. I'll start over. It's a painting with 3 panels, okay? 1 large central panel, this one, and 2 smaller hinged side panels. There's no other way to define it. I'll say it again. A triptych is a painting with 3 panels, semicolon, I guess. 1 large central panel and 2 smaller hinged side panels. If you wonder why we say hinge, it's because that's exactly how that's a hinge, right? That means they can fold them up. It's portable. That's really the reason. That's not part of the definition, but as the reason these were made that way. These were meant to be moved around between different churches during the Renaissance. And so whoever commissioned them, a bishop, right, maybe of a cathedral, or even just maybe a head priest or something in a monastery, they might have that triptych first in that church or that monastery on display for a while, but then it could be moved to another place. They're portable, and I don't have to demonstrate, right, because I don't have any video options here at this point in my classes files. But you could see how if you move these 2 panels, pull them close, they would literally cover the middle panel, and then it's all protected. You can put it on a horse cart and take it up the river or whatever, over the mountain to the next town, next cathedral, whatever. So they're portable. They're portable paintings, and they're almost always religious themes. Okay, so let's give the other definition. Covers everything. Oh, here we go. Welcome. We're just starting. This is the first must-know slide. So this is a Renaissance painting. That definition is fairly short. It's very important because it covers everything we're covering for the next, I think it's 4 lectures this week and the next 3. So what was the Renaissance? By the way, these are always shorter than the glossary definitions in your stocks that I can tell you. They're much easier to use these terms, I hope, and understand and remember them. But they'll be in front of you if you need to read through them during the exams. Okay, so Renaissance, here we go. It's a period from circa, remember circa, the little c, right, about, right? So you don't have to write that, but it means approximately. From circa 14 to 1600 in Europe, specifically a European period. It's a period of history from circa 1400 to 1600 in Europe, comma, which was a revival of ancient classical art, okay, and learning. It was both, right? It was a revival of ancient classical art and learning, one more comma, with an emphasis on Christian religious themes, period. Last part again is with an emphasis on Christian religious themes. Well, almost all of the first half of the Renaissance, the painters were sticking to religious themes in their paintings, almost all, at least the famous ones that we haven't covered in this class. But you'll see it changes a bit as you get toward the late Renaissance, when more humanistic themes come up, less religious art. But to start with early Renaissance, that definitely is going to be religious. And this painting, let's talk about the meaning now of this painting, okay? It's a scene from the Bible in which an angel, I'm going to give you a close-up now. Yeah, there we go. An angel, and there she is with the wings, or actually angels don't have gender, right? According to what I've read. So just say an angel, the one with the wings, comes down from heaven to tell Mary, that's Mary, future mother of Jesus, that she will give birth to Jesus, right? It's a pretty important moment in the history of Christian religion. And it's in the Bible, there's description of this. So it's a scene from the Bible where this angel comes down, sent by God, of course, to inform or announce. The right word is annunciation, but you can just say announce, make an announcement to Mary that she's going to become the mother of Jesus, who, according to Christian religion, is the Son of God, right? Pretty intense moment, right? Well, she doesn't know that yet. Look, you can tell by her face. I think I have another slightly more. No, that one's discolored. Yeah, let's stick with this one. I want to show you some of the details, so let's get up close. She doesn't look like she's aware of any major event about to happen. I know, it's just she's reading a book, right? Can't be the Bible yet. Well, I suppose it could be the Torah, the Jewish, right? First half of the Bible is called the Torah. We don't know. Just say she's reading a book and she's unaware of this momentous event that's going to happen, to her. So this depicts that moment, that intense, change of her life. And of course, now what, 2.5 billion people around the world are Christians, right? So it changed the history of the world. So in any case, the angel that's in the Bible, that's what the Bible says. We're just describing a scene from the Bible. And again, of course, in this class, whether you believe in any of this is your business. It's just how the painting was interpreted and intended to be interpreted. Okay, so what about the symbolism? That's actually a word called iconography, one word. It's in Sarah Gill's book, but you aren't going to have to know that as a definition or use that word at all if you don't want to. But it means the study of symbols and their meaning. So what symbols? Here's what you should write the next part. I just described the overall meaning of the scene, but now we need to focus on the details. And so let's look at some of the symbols. We'll start with, I'm going to go back because this isn't as sharp. I got these from different files. I think this one will blow up better. Yeah, that's better. This is lilies, or these flowers. This is a pot of lilies, right? A pitcher, actually. They just say lilies, that's all. Lilies are symbolic of purity or innocence in Renaissance paintings. Well, what purity? Whose purity? Mary's. According to the Bible, in other words, to cut to the chase, she supposedly was able to give birth to Jesus without ever having nasty business, sex right? That's what the Bible says. Again, what you believe is not even the point here. It's just what we're looking at is what the painter intended us to see, which is that means Mary will be a virgin even after she gives birth. And if you're Catholic, you already know that we were raised Catholic. I'm a lapsed Catholic myself. So yeah, the point is you just need to keep it simple and say each symbol, I'm going to give you like 3 or 4. One sentence. What is the meaning of the lilies? It's to symbolize Mary's virginity or purity. There we go. One sentence about those. Why are the lilies? Okay, another symbol is the extinguished. Remember, that's with an EX, not distinguished with a D. An extinguished candle is symbolic in any Renaissance paintings, that you call all Renaissance art. It's symbolic of the presence of God's Spirit in the room. Even though God himself didn't come down, right? He sent an angel to make this announcement. Supposedly his spirit is in the room. Another symbol of God's presence is this, what looks like a floating cross, right? But it's supposedly the Holy Ghost. It's hard to see because I don't think it can get much bigger than this. Let's see if in the other view, I'm going to try this. The larger overall view, you might be able to see that better. I don't know if you can. Not really, yeah, because this one wasn't from the same website. So let's stick with the sharpest image of it. Okay, so this here, I'll go back up to a slight enhancement there, is supposed to be, looks like it's coming through the window or something. Well, it's supposed to go through the wall. It's just a floating spirit. They call it the Holy Ghost. You can just say God's Spirit is entering the room. I don't ask you why they had to use 2 symbols for the same thing. That's up to the painter, but that's what those 2 symbols mean: the extinguished candle and the, you can say floating cross. Keep it simple. It's actually supposed to be a Holy Ghost carrying a cross, but that's too complicated. So just say that the floating or hovering cross near the window is also symbolic of God's Spirit entering the room. And then the last symbol I'll give you now. Let's go up. I think we're as close as we can get. Is the clear water. If you got up close, I've seen this paint. If you get up close, you can see there's just clear water in that pot. So a pot with clear liquid or water is a second symbol, a second way of symbolizing Mary's purity or virginity. So that's plenty. See, right there, you've got 4 facts about the meaning of this, plus the scene. I just told you it's a scene from the Bible. So there's 5. And if it's on the exam, which it could be, like I said, I'm not cutting this slide from the study list for the midterm, then you'd have 5 of the 6 sentences you need to write about the meaning to get full credit. So the last thing you could, just please, questions. I haven't finished, but go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Did you have a question? Sorry. Yeah, okay, at the end, I always stop before I move on to the next slide to ask if you have questions. Okay, let's wrap up on the meaning now. One more fact about it is, what style is this? Well, it's one of your other terms from the list of terms to know. Early Northern Renaissance. So what does that mean? Well, early Northern Renaissance is the period from, one more person joining us here. Okay, welcome. Early Northern Renaissance is a period in Northern Europe from about, again, little c is a short way to write about, but you can write it all the way out, A, B, O, U, T, whatever. I just use little c. That's what everyone else does. So from now on, I'm just going to say circa. From circa 1400 to 1450, during which artists used some, but not all, of the techniques of the Italian Renaissance. During which artists use some, but not all, of the techniques of the Italian Renaissance. What does that have to do with broader definition of Renaissance? It's a subcategory, if you want to look at a sub, group of artists who lived north of the Alps in Northern Europe, outside Italy. Why is that relevant? I think most of you know, but if you didn't, you will by the end of next week's lecture for sure, if you didn't already, or you should have done this reading in Stockstead. The Renaissance began in Italy. Nobody debates it. All the techniques of the early Renaissance, with maybe one exception, oil painting, could have begun in Northern Europe, but even many historians think now it was an Italian invention. But every other technique we're going to cover in the next 3 weeks for how to do a painting or an engraving, all these advanced ideas that were much better than ancient or medieval art could do, these new ideas came out of Italy. So that's the birthplace of the Renaissance. So when we say Northern Renaissance, again, that means artists who were just starting to be influenced by the Italian artists that they had seen works of, or even some of them went to visit Italy during that first 50 years of the Renaissance or so. And they saw those techniques, and some of them could master a few, but they weren't able to get all the techniques that the Italians had learned until by the mid 1400s. So that's what that means. Let's go now to a full view. You don't need to worry about what these two panels mean. If you're curious, I'll tell you, but you don't have to write this down. These are the donors, the people who paid for this painting and gave it as a gift to their local church. See, they get their schnozzles and permanently recorded there. And then this is Joseph, who doesn't know what's happening with his wife next door. He's working in he's her husband. According to the Bible, he was just, not around when all these events occurred. We found out about them later, of course. Anyway, so don't even have to write about it. These two panels are not going to be on the exam, but the middle panel might be. Okay, let's wrap up with the formal analysis. Yes? I hear somebody asking or starting to. Do you have a question? Sorry. Okay, maybe it's just the background noise. All right, let's go to the formal analysis. I'm going to tell you right now, just so you'll know, it's going to be easier on some of these works, many of them, than others. The meaning is more complex on some of the Renaissance and even later styles of painting than it is on maybe most of it. So keeping that in mind, that I hope helps you to realize that, this is going to have more notes we just did on the meaning than you often would need to, right? Just for future reference. Okay, so let's wrap up with the formal analysis. What techniques does this use, right, from the Italian Renaissance that were first invented there? Well, realistic, sharp modeling. Remember, we covered this on Monday, so hopefully you were here for that lecture. If not, watch it on Friday. Under R2.1, I already explained that if you joined late. It didn't record Monday, but I just recorded the same lecture on Monday night. So it'll be labeled, week 2, 9 elements composition. You can see those if you didn't already. And you should be reading your guild that explains them all as we go along. So modeling is this, obviously the shadowing on her robes and the angels, and even around the room, the fireplace, and this little niche back here. That's sharp and realistic modeling. So if you're writing in this on the exam, or you're writing a paper about it, you would say that exactly on the clothing of the two figures, on the wall, especially around the fireplace and in the niche. That'd be good enough. 2 examples. So strong realistic modeling, it's a Renaissance technique. Another is realistic or sharp, let's say it either way, simulated textures. And that's on the hair and the skin and the clothing of the two main figures. And then on the wood on the floor, the wood of the bench Mary's leaning onto, the stone walls. You get the idea. It's all realistic, very sharp and realistic, simulated textures. So that's a second technique under formal analysis for this slide, but it also is something that this artist learned from studying Italian Renaissance painting. And then we have balance. That's not a new idea. Of course, that's not Renaissance. That exists in the ancient world. Is it balance? Well, you might say, oh no, because the angel's head is a good couple of feet taller than Mary's, and she's sitting down and the angel is sort of standing. But I don't think of it that way. I think it's roughly balanced because of this. The windows and the fireplace mantle are about the same. And then when you look behind Mary, this area in the fireplace, but you can see it differently. So I would call it roughly balanced, but you might think of it as weighted or unbalanced toward the left. And then of course, it definitely isn't balanced top to bottom, because it's mostly wall, in the background above the two figures. And almost all the other objects are below the middle. So it's unbalanced toward the bottom. The rhythm is obvious. I think by now you guys already seem to understand that one when we did it on Monday. Pretty easy. There are 2 heads, right? This angel has 2 wings. There are the robes with, all the creases. So much rhythm. The bench with the parts of the bench, the 2 windows. Rhythm is everywhere. This is true of all Renaissance paintings. So you have plenty of examples of that. And then we have line. The line here is all thin outline. There's no bold outline here. Michelangelo, about 100 years later, invented that technique. And then we have colors. Well, she's got a warm red, right, a robe on, and all the woodwork, of course, it's very shades of brown and gold, kind of like pine and oak, whatever, woods. It's all earth tones, all warm, as are the angel's wings. But the angel's robe is cool. and the skin on their two faces are one. Okay, and then the largest mass, I think it's about equal between Mary and the angel, but the angel with the wings maybe added is slightly larger mass. Then Mary perhaps, and then the bench, I would say, that she's leaning on. But now we get to I'm only going to give you like 6, I don't want to overwhelm you, of the elements, or 7 sometimes, all 9, but usually not all 9 on each slide, so we can keep moving. But if you have questions about any of these elements I don't talk about, feel free to ask before we move on. But to wrap up the formal analysis, what about space? Oh, here's where it falls down. Here's where it's not as good as a Renaissance, Italian Renaissance painting, because in Italy by this time, they knew scientific perspective. They knew that things, and we covered that, remember, on Monday in the lecture on the 9 elements, that they'd have a common vanishing point, which would be somewhere outside the window, or the horizon would be. This painting doesn't have that. And how do we know? Well, just take a look at that table. It's almost laughable. These objects, all of the objects on the table would go clattering onto the floor because the tabletop is tilted upward and in no relationship to the objects around it, to the bench or the walls. And so this artist did not know how to use realistic perspective, scientific perspective, or a vanishing point. He hadn't learned that yet in Northern Europe. So there's one of the examples of why this is an early Northern Renaissance. Besides the fact that it was painted in Belgium, which is Northern Europe, obviously. Okay, any questions before we move on? All right, let's get to the next one. This is a really important one too. I'm not going to cut it because this has several layers of meaning, and I'll just stick the 2 or 3 most important aspects. But this is on your syllabus, is the second one down. It's the Ghent, G-H-E-N-T, another city in Belgium. Ghent, G-H-E-N-T, Altarpiece. I've already spelled that word right, A-L-T-A-R, one word, Altarpiece. The artist was a rare example of 2 artists whose name appear together because they were brothers. They did this painting together. Jan and Hubert Von Aike. Some people would say Jan, but that's the English pronunciation. They were, well, today they'd be Belgian. Back then, it was all part of what's today called Holland. So people back then would have considered them Dutch. And that's how their names are pronounced. John, or Jan, J-A-N, the brother Hubert, H-U-B-E-R-T, Van Eyck. That's 2 words. Capital V-A-N, second part of the name, capital E-Y-C-K. 1432. This is a masterpiece. This piece was, Hitler tried to capture this piece during World War II. He sent Gestapo into Belgium to try, and it was hidden away from him. Goering, you may have heard this, the head of the Nazi Air Force that murdered so many people, innocent people, in every city they bombed, trying to make London surrender. Right, for a year they bombed it non-stop, night and day. Yeah, that war criminal. Yeah, he loved Renaissance painting, and he knew this was one of the most valuable paintings in the world. You don't have to write this. It's not part of the meeting, but I just thought you'd find it interesting. And he couldn't get his grubby little hands on it because it was safely hidden in a cave somewhere. I forget where, in some part of Belgium, the hills of Belgium. Survived the war intact, and it wasn't damaged in bombing or anything. Okay, so let's get to the meaning of this one. Well, this is not a triptych. Now you need to look carefully. I think you could already, some of you figured that out. That part would have been, if that's all it was, let's lower it down. Trying to get it to come down here. Not wanting to do that. Yeah, there we go. But that's not the whole painting. That's why I'm showing you the whole view here. It's not a triptych if it's got more, and it obviously has more. It's got 4 panels on the front and 4 on the back. It's got actually 8 panels. So don't write that here's another triptych in your notes. The first factor right about the meaning is it's an altarpiece, which the other one was too. That just means a painting done for a church, to be displayed or exhibited in a church. So someone at that church commissioned it, or a group of people in that church. And it was in a city in Belgium. So these 2 brothers were the most advanced, you could say, or skilled of all. There's another fact about the meaning. Of all the early Northern Renaissance painters, they were the most skilled or advanced. I think there's some, don't have to write this, but there's some people think they maybe made a trip to Italy and learned directly from the artists there in the Italian Renaissance how to do these things. They are the first artists. Now, this you should write as a second fact about the meaning, is that these 2 brothers were the first early Northern Renaissance painters, or you could just say Northern Renaissance painters, to use scientific perspective. And when you get up close, you can see the line. See, look at that. If anybody ever lived in a house with a 1950s tile work on the floor of the bath, like my house had when I first moved into it, it looks like the tile in a bathroom or some, other public space. And yes, they made tiles like that in Belgium and Holland back then. So that tiled floor, the lines, the grouting, what are you going to call between the tiles, the lines are diagonal lines, and they all would meet at a common vanishing point behind, well, who's that on the throne? Okay, the next fact to write about the meaning is, who are these three people? You only have to write about the upper half if it's on the exam. They are God, there he is in the middle on the highest throne, and he has the biggest crown, right? So God's in the middle, and then Mary, after she died and gone to heaven, right? Supposedly up in heaven. We'll talk about the symbolism of their crowns in a minute. So you've got God in the middle, Mary on his right, and on his left is John the Baptist, supposedly the first Christian, the one who taught Jesus about Christianity. And he has a Bible in his hand. And that's how we know. Plus, he's got I call it hippie hairdo. You get up close, you can see long hair and a beard and an animal skin coat. So his symbolism always, Renaissance painting, if you're going to show John the Baptist, whether he's by himself or with a group of people, he's shown as having, of course, now they're both dead up in heaven, right? And of course, God is immortal, right? They have died and their souls are up in heaven. This is supposed to be a scene in heaven. Is that John the Baptist always is shown with long hair and a beard, an animal skin coat, and holding a Bible. What about Mary? Well, let's get up close to her. We got a couple closer views here. Let me do that for her because she's the most interesting figure here. Look, she's got a really fancy crown, but all you have to remember about it is there's your lilies. Remember, that's symbolic of her being a virgin even after she gave birth. Right? But what about the red roses? Okay, that's one other symbol we haven't seen yet. Red roses in Renaissance painting symbolize sacrifice or the loss of a life. She was willingly accepting, or did accept, the death, the horrible death of her son, right, on the cross, right? That part we know is not speculation. That really happened. There was such a person. The Romans kept records like nobody else had ever done before. So we know there was a trial, and we know who all the facts about that. The execution of him and all the other prisoners that same day, we know who they were and where they were executed. So she did lose her son, but according to the Bible, she was, willing to, give up his or sacrifice his life for the, idea of religion, of Christianity. So she's shown as having been willing to accept the death of her son, right? And so that red roses are symbolic of sacrifice of her son to the greater, supposedly, according to Christians, greater good of spreading the word of Christianity. Okay, so that's all the symbolism here, but except, oh, wait a minute, one more, I forgot. God, what about his throne? His is a little different, his crown, sorry. His crown here is just a little bit more, much more, actually, if you look at it. It's bigger, taller, you could say it that way, or larger and fancier, because he is the power of the old, according to the Bible. Jumped around there. Supposedly God's power is ultimate, is infinite. Sorry, I'm in trouble with my English language today. I'll say it again. God has infinite power over the universe, and that's symbolized by both his higher position, so we'll go back to the broad view, above the other two figures, on a higher crown, right, also being in the middle, and then by his much, much fancier and or larger crown. So his throne, I meant to say, is higher than theirs, and the crown is bigger. So that's symbolic of his having power over the universe. And then one of my students once asked about this, and I looked it up. The second crown, like a regular king on earth would have, that's symbolic of his power on earth. If he wants to, according to the Bible, he can make floods happen or whatever. So supposedly his power is infinite. There we go, infinite over both the universe and down on earth. So that's plenty on the meaning here. Let's do the formal analysis. Okay, it's balanced. Clearly, you've got these two figures that are almost exactly the same height, right? Mary and John the Baptist. And then you've got God, right, dead center in the middle. And then we have the sizes of the figures are almost the same. So for mass, God seems to be slightly larger. If he were to stand up, he'd probably be taller than both. So you'd say the largest mass is God. And then it's your call. Do you think that John the Baptist might be, possibly would be a little taller than Mary if he stood up? So you could say he's the second largest, and then she's the third largest mass. Simulated textures, we've already covered with all early Northern Renaissance. It's a given, but if you're writing this now, just so you have it in your notes, are super sharp. They are, according to many historians, these two brothers, Jan and Hubert Von Aike, who painted this, may have invented oil painting. If so, it'd be the only new technique invented outside of Italy during the early Renaissance. We can't prove that though. But in any case, they were the first Northern Renaissance artists to use oil paint. So that gives you, if any of you are art, I know some of you studied art from your mini bios, then you know it's usually easier to paint realistic, sharp, simulated texture. We see that on the beard and the hair, right? And the clothing, and even the crowns, right? And this is supposed to be gold painted, I guess. It probably wood painted gold behind them on each of them has a thumb. So all those textures are super sharp and realistic everywhere, as is the modeling. The modeling is strong and realistic. I think it's mostly stable, not very. The only things dynamic really are the tops of their thrones behind them, and maybe their crowns. I guess the two crowns, but they're all three sitting pretty much upright, pretty straightforward. Slight tilt to Mary's head, mostly stable with some dynamic detail. And then we have line here. It's all thin outline. You don't see much bold outline before Michelangelo in European painting. Okay, and then for space, we've got 3 or 4 techniques. We've got overlapping, right? They overlap figures of their background, of their thrones. We've got scientific perspective, as I just mentioned, with the diagonal lines actually visible on the painting. Now, horizon line would be way in the back behind God's throne. And then I don't know, I think I see foreshortening. So that'd be the only other technique. Yeah, on her shoulders a little bit, and certainly on John, where they're turned sideways, a slight bit of, not on God, because he's facing straight forward. I'm going to do a quick, you don't have to write now. You can start, that's plenty on, and the color. Sorry, I always want to do color. Well, it's pretty obvious. He's the warm color because the painter wants you to notice God first. And then you've got the cool colors of the blue robes on Mary, which, by the way, she's always shown in blue because she is the queen of heaven, quote unquote, according to the Bible. When she dies and goes to heaven and lives forever up in heaven, she would be considered, quote, the queen of heaven. Okay, and that's the royal color is blue. In Europe, it's always been blue. That's why they say the word blue bloods, meaning royalty, right? So she's got blue robes always in a Renaissance painting, and those are cool colors, as are the green robes on John the Baptist. But all 3 of them have warm colors on their hair and skin. Okay, let's just take a minute to talk about this scene. Don't have to write notes, but I think it's more than a little relevant right now. And that's what's going on in the bottom panel, even though it's not going to be asked on the test. Well, it's the last judgment. Supposedly God sends Jesus down to earth one more time, disguised as a lamb who's going to the body. You have to write it this. But I think it's interesting because it's relevant to what we're debating in our society right now about social justice. I'm not going to get political, not at all. But just what is this supposed to symbolize? Well, it's a scene in the Bible in which God sends Jesus as disguised as a lamb with several angels to decide who gets to go to heaven and who goes to hell. And the people that are being saved are depicted in this painting in the bottom section here and in these 2 groups. And everyone else in this it was a big city, Ghent, Belgium, where this, 100,000 even then, now it's like 300,000 something. It's a big city in Belgium. So all the rest of the people, the peasants, the workers, the shopkeepers, right, the artisans and craftsmen, you don't see anybody who isn't rich. Look, they're all high-ranking church officials, right? Whoops. Or they are wealthy. You can tell by the way they're dressed, men wearing, fancy robes and, fur hats. And so what does that tell you? According to the not the painters. That's not their choice. They were told to paint a scene that showed only rich people getting to go to heaven. That was the message that these sponsors of this painting, right? The people who actually donated it to the church wanted that message. But I'll just finish with this thought if you didn't know it. When Jesus was asked about whether rich people can go to heaven, some of you know this, his answer was, it's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to get into heaven. So you do the math. Obviously, this isn't what was being taught in the old original, sermons, what do I call them, that Jesus gave. He never said anything about, hey, all you rich people, you got to go to heaven. That's not quite what the Bible itself says, but that's okay because it's political, of course, and it's being paid for, sponsored by people who were wanting to show themselves as more important and more valuable than most other people at the time, which was, 98% of the, or 99% of the society was either poor or just surviving, small craftsman things. And they aren't shown getting to go to heaven. Okay, I think we have to do another, yeah, we do. We're going to do a different screen share. So I'm going to stop the share now. Hang on, this takes a moment. I have to go to a different file. It doesn't take very long. All right. And we'll get to the next few slides. And if we don't get to all of them today, we'll finish up with this list and move on Monday. Okay, here we go. I know you guys are getting to see these files. Okay, so what we want to do is the later Renaissance. It's down the list. This is for all my classes here in the file. Okay. All right. Oh, that's the wrong file. Sorry, that's my mistake. My bad. 2.1. Okay, let's get. Whew. That's the thing with these laptops with no mouse, they do kind of go off on their own. Okay, it may take me a minute more. Let's see. Okay. Well, flip it up. Okay, here we go. Sorry, I forgot that it was buried within the others. Now we're on the right track, exactly. Okay, let's go to the next must know. Well, first I have to select that slide. And that, let's do it, if we can, in the order here. All right, we're gonna do the Dome of Florence Cathedral next. We'll go back to the wedding portrait with time. If not, then we'll do it first thing on Monday. Okay, so we're going to do the Dome of Florence Cathedral. And that is right here. Here we go. So this is a must know. And I'm not saying it's so important I won't cut it, but you just assume any slide I'm going to give you a notes on, it might be on the midterm. Okay, so it's the fourth one down. Dome of Florence Cathedral. And Florence, I think you all know how to spell, right? Cathedral. 3 words. The artist's last name is an architect, of course, and architects are artists. Remember that. Brunelleschi, and I know it's a long Italian name, but you'll have your notes in front of you during the exam. So I'll spell it slowly. It's Brunelleschi. Brunelleschi, 1436. Okay. So I'm going to do a close-up of this because I didn't see any good, sharp, clear images. This one is one of the better ones I could find that showed just the dome. And the reason is that they always showed with the church. So let's start with, what is this? This is a cathedral. It is Florence Cathedral, right? It's a Catholic cathedral in Florence, which was the birthplace of the Renaissance. And the dome is the first domed building. I'll put the arrow right on it. There it is. That's what we're going to focus on. The first domed building, this church, you could say, became, when the dome was finished in 1436, this became the first domed building since ancient Rome in Europe. That's amazing. It's 1,000 years they forgot after Rome fell. Architects in Europe, no matter what part of Europe you're talking about, didn't know how to make domes. So what did Brunelleschi do? He studied ancient Roman architecture, and then he also worked as an engineer. So he was, doubly talented. He was both an engineer. He had to be to design this big a dome and not have it collapse for 600 years. So he, as an engineer and an architect, he was able to design a solid, sturdy, you could say stable, but it was stable dome that became the first dome used on any building in Europe since the fall of Rome for almost 1,000 years. That's a pretty remarkable achievement. It's also one of the largest domes in Europe. It's over 330 feet high. That includes this little room up here. Now I'm going to ask, I think some of you said you'd been to Florence. I believe I heard that one time I asked what.
Mr. Wilson,
Yes, please, go ahead.
is the screen being shared right now? Because I can't see anything.
Yep, thank you. That creates the next thing I should have thought to ask. And you guys are being very helpful for your fellow students. Here we go. So what we have to do is get this back to where the screen share shows up. And that means we have to get all of this off and hit screen share. Thank you. That wouldn't work if we didn't do it. Okay. You know what I'm going to do? Yeah, this actually works if we can do it this way. I can go back and forth more quickly. So hopefully when I get this to the full screen, and let me ask, thank you again for pointing it out. Can you guys see this now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I put it on screen sharing. Yeah, it says you are screen, but I can never tell what you guys, on your screen. It says you are screen sharing at the top of my monitor. Okay, let's resume or recap what I said, because if you couldn't see it, it might not have been obvious what I was talking about. We're going to just study the dome here. This is a dome that was designed or added to, you could say, an earlier Catholic cathedral. You could just say cathedral. Yeah, it's Europe was all Catholic back then. So it was added to a cathedral in the early Renaissance by an architect who was both an engineer and an architect. And he therefore created the first domed building in Europe in nearly 1,000 years. Because the Romans, of course, invented domes. You might know that from your early art history if you took art history before this. The Romans invented domes, and they had done them for hundreds and hundreds of years. But then the Middle Ages comes along and everyone forgot how to make a dome. It's not a simple thing to make a dome that won't collapse. So this architect became the first great Renaissance architect, period. That's another fact about who was Brunelleschi, the first great Renaissance architect. That simple. No debating on that. And also the first one to use domes, or a dome. He actually designed others, but just say in this case. The first one to use a dome on any building in Europe in nearly 1,000 years. Okay, but that doesn't tell us much about the specific aspects of this dome that we need to concentrate on. So you see where my cursor is, right? You all see that. This dome is a double dome. It's all part of the meaning now. That means he designed first a wooden framework in the exact same shape that you're looking at there, that it forms into a dome, which then supports the outer shell of stonework. So it's a double dome, or another way to say that is it's a dome within a dome. And that would mean that those two, right, sections support each other. The stonework is resting on the inner frame, wooden framework. And the inner framework, of course, is held together by the pressure of the outer walls of stone. You have to be really talented to figure out how to do that and make it not collapse in on. You can see, even I have no background in engineering, but you get the concept, right? It's a very delicate mathematic calculation. He had to be, he was a genius. So he figured out how to do this immense dome. By the way, it's still one of the tallest domes in Europe. It's over 300 feet tall, with another 30-foot high. This little room up here is called a cupola. That's part of the meaning, so you could write that now. If it's on an exam, you only have to remember 6 of these facts that I'm giving, but I always give you more than that on the meaning in the notes. Okay, so that little room, it's C-U-P-O-L-A, it's an Italian word. It's always a small room resting on top of a dome or a roof. Anybody go to the Petaluma campus? I imagine they haven't changed it. I used to teach both campuses. all the buildings on the Petaluma campus have cupolas. They're square or rectangular, but there are little rooms at the top of those. I don't even know what they use them for. Why would there be a little room with windows on top of a domed church building? It's for observation, so people can look out. So I was asking before we figured out that I needed to add the screen share. Anybody here now in this Zoom meeting been to Florence at all? Anybody? I thought one or two had. Well, at least among those who have, the lucky few, I never got to go into this. The stairways were closed. The 2 times I went inside this cathedral, you weren't allowed to go into them for repairs or cleaning or something. So I've never been up there, but I hear the view is spectacular. You can see all across the Italian countryside. So that's what a cupola is for. It's like an observation room. Okay, but what else about the dome is important is that it has these ribs which help strengthen it. See, that's stonework on top of the walls themselves, the outer shell of the walls, that's stone too. So it's an added reinforcement that the architect Brunelleschi figured out would help strengthen and stabilize the dome. Okay, so remember, it's only this section. If it's on the exam, that's all that you're going to have to write about when it comes to formal analysis. So let's do that now. The only warm colors are on the tile. Really well, a little bit of brickwork here. So I guess there is 2 sections of wall, but the actual stonework itself, the marble, it is marble by the way, it is either off-white or light green, and those are cool colors. And the cupola definitely. So it's, well, let's just say it's a mixture of some warm and some cool colors. The textures are all real smooth textures. Real smooth glass, these are windows, these round windows. Real smooth marble on the walls and on these ribs, they're called ribs. And then the cupola, so all the stonework is smooth, real marble texture, and then smooth, real glass, and then the tiles are smooth, real texture, no simulated textures. There is no real line, carved line, but there is visual line. You could mention it down here. That's more detailed than you'd need to get on your exam. But if you wrote a paper about this, you would want to mention these patterns. You can see them a little bit up here too in the front of the church. And Brunelleschi didn't design the rest of the church. It was 200 years old when he built the dome. So just say that there are some visual lines worked into the tile or paneling. You can say decorative patterns, and let's say patterns in the marble. Otherwise, the lines are just visual, where the shadowing, that's where the modeling is from the sunlight. There's no technique for modeling. It's just the shadows that create visual lines around these ribs. Okay, so there isn't any carved or drawn line. And then the largest mass is the dome. It's in 3 sections. Then the base, right, of the dome, and then the cupola. And finally, we'll just do space. Of course, with architecture, you should always write about the space. The space is one large, open, domed space, or you could say area, which is over 300 feet tall. Actually, to be exact, it's about 330 feet tall, because this cupola is open. You know, if you were inside, you walk on the stairs and they go around the edge of it. You know, so then you look down, you're looking down 300 feet below you to the floor of the church. So it's open, even though there are stairs around the outer walls of the cupola. So you have to get that detailed again. Just keep it simple. Say that this is one large open domed space with a ceiling over 300, or you could just round it off. I mean, you could be more specific, I'm sorry, and say about 330 feet tall. That's the space. Okay, any questions before we move on to the next must know? Okay. I'm going to cut something. Remember, I told you we have I reserve the right to do that as we go along. Let me see. Actually, this is from next week, I think. Yeah, I'll cut this from next. Well, let's do it now, and I'll repeat it next week. Flip to week 3. So this, you'll know, means that next week's lecture won't be quite as long as it would otherwise be. If you want to do it now, and I'll repeat it next week if you prefer to wait. I'm going to cut the Church of San Andrea. That's this slide. I mean, I know churches start to look alike. I'm well aware of that. So I try to keep that to a minimum. Okay, so the 3rd slide down on the week 3, next page, just cross it off. We're not going to do that one. It won't be on the lecture, or definitely not on the exam. Okay, that's going too far. I need to go back now, because that's definitely for week 3. So let's go back. Here we go. This is going to be interesting. Just kind of, oh, there we go. I want to do it in the order that they appear within each week, and then it doesn't get confusing. Okay, this is the next month. So Jacob and Esau. Jacob, it's two Jewish prophets from the Bible. Jacob, Jacob, and Esau. I think they were brothers, Esau. The artist's name was Ghiberti, Ghiberti, 1425. Okay. Okay, so what is this? Last new definition, and it's very short. It's on your list down below triptych, on your list of terms. Bas-relief, what is that? It's a two-dimensional work of art with raised figures off of a flat background. A two-dimensional work of art with raised figures off a flat background. Well, these are raised figures, and that's a flat background. So it's a bas-relief panel made out of bronze, and this is the meaning, of course. It's one of 16 panels, bas-relief panels, from the doors of Florence Cathedral. We just saw the cathedral from a distance. If you go to Florence and you ever go in that church, you'll walk right by these panels. They're right in front of you. Okay, so what does this scene depict? We'll keep it very simple. A scene from the Bible in which two Jewish prophets, remember that's P-R-O-P-H-T-S, of course not P-R-O-F-I-T-S. These two prophets, Jacob and Esau, doesn't matter who's who, which is which, they were helping, answer people's questions about their future. That's what a prophet does. And this is a scene in front of a wealthy Jewish person's house in ancient Israel. That's enough to know. There are more details, but that's plenty for the meaning of the purpose of this course. So what's really important, though, is that this is the first work of art that we can document the use of scientific perspective. You see on my arrows? Every one of the diagonals is clearly visible as part of the floor tile pattern. You see that? And they would all keep going past the end of this patio. Of course, that's a patio underneath a portico, right? It's portico here. If you go all the way past that portico, they would meet on the horizon line, which isn't used on this one, but they would keep going, and obviously eventually we meet at a single vanishing point. That's the definition we gave on Monday with the lecture on the 9 elements. So if you missed that, you do want to watch that after 8 p.m. on Friday on YouTube. They would all have a common vanishing point off in the distance. That is the first, this work of art, I should say, is the first use of scientific perspective that we have documented. It's actually earlier than the date. The date 1425 is the date that the entire set of 16 panels were completed. Most historians believe this panel was completed much earlier, as early as 10 years before that, but certainly by 1420. Now, you don't have to write that, but what you just say, again, I'll repeat that, is why it's an important detail. Otherwise, it's just a scene from the Bible. Who cares, right? They're all over the Renaissance in Italy. But it is important because it's the first known, you could say, or documented example of the use of scientific perspective. And when this panel was made, the painters who created some of the first paintings with scientific perspective were inspired. So that's the last fact to say about the meaning of this slide. Many of the early Renaissance painters were inspired to use a new technique of scientific perspective by seeing this panel. Because if they were in Florence, they almost all went to that church because it was the cathedral for the whole city of Florence. So any successful artist would have gone to church services there, and they would have walked right by this, and they would have watched it being created by Ghiberti, the artist. So again, it's a seminal. I haven't used that word, I don't think yet, but you'll hear me use it throughout the semester. It's a good word to know. It's not a definition you'll have to write, but it just means a new technique or a piece of art that created a new technique. Or that can be true for not just art, but science and literature. But in visual arts, it's when a piece of art introduces a new style. That's called a seminal work of art. This absolutely qualifies. Okay, let's do the formal analysis, and then we'll do one more slide quickly and wrap up maybe about 416 or so. So this is a warm color. Obviously, it's gold. It looks like gold. It's really bronze, but it has a gold cast. It's full of the rhythm of the arches and the columns, and of course the floor tiles and the human figures. It is unbalanced. Clearly, this one is towards the left, isn't it? Because there are more bodies on the left half than the right. and definitely unbalanced toward the bottom for obvious reasons, all that empty space. This has scientific perspective, diminishing size for space now, right? It's got overlapping. Every work of art has that, unless it's just a single object. So any work of art with two or more objects, even cave paintings, use overlapping. So that's obvious, right, where the objects overlap the people and each other. And then it gets diminishing size, right, as you get further back to the figures in the middle ground. And it has scientific perspective and foreshortening. The floor, right, and the arches have foreshortening. So those four techniques are found here. And then we have dynamic and stable. Well, the human figures are mostly stable. I mean, even these two, mostly, it's pretty close to the kneeling figure here and the sitting figure, the other prophet. They're pretty much at right angles. All the standing figures, except this guy, are pretty much upright. The columns, of course, and the floor itself would be, of course, horizontal. That's all stable. The only thing really dynamic are the arches. The largest mass, that's hard to say, probably the portico. If it's one structure, probably one big, large porch area. Then maybe the floor, and then you decide. This group of women, what is it, 6 women talking or so, several. You could say that's the third largest. The modeling, well, that's a given. In bas-relief figures, you couldn't see the details if it weren't for the shadows. So the sun would have created the modeling, natural modeling. And that's done with carved line, of course, into the bronze, right? Before it was cast, or into the clay model before the bronze was cast. So just a carved line is used. There's no painted line. And so the simulated texture, we'll do it last, that is extremely sharp and realistic on, right, the faces, the clothing, the hair. Okay, we're just going to do one more, and we'll keep that to a minimum. But this is an important slide, and one I won't cut from the list, so you do want to take good notes on it. This one is, you know what? Why don't we backtrack to, let's see, we can't do the wedding portrait in just 5 minutes, and it's too important to rush through that. We'll start with that next week. So I'm looking here. Oh, the Church of San Lorenzo. This will be quick because it's very simple. One more must know. Let's get to that. There it is. Okay, here's our last must know for today. Church of San Lorenzo. I always think of the city in southern Alameda County, but it's nothing like that. Of course, it's the same spelling as the town I'm talking about. San, S-A-N, of course. Second word, Lorenzo, L-O-R-E-N-Z-O. This architect's the same. So he was the first great Renaissance architect, Brunelleschi. Oh, he spelled his name right. And the date is 1446. So this is what, 10 years after he did the dome of Florence Cathedral. Why we're looking at it is because it's a classic example. This building is a classic example of Renaissance church architecture, which always had three features, okay? And those are perfect symmetry, total bilateral now, I should say that, side to side, right, left to right. Complete bilateral, because complete or total bilateral symmetry. I've never seen a Renaissance church that didn't have that. It was a principle of almost all Renaissance architecture, especially churches. So bilateral, same number of windows, same width, you draw a line down the middle, they're mirror images. I think you've all heard the term bilateral symmetry. All Renaissance style churches had that. Second feature would be rows of columns and arches. There's a word for that, it's called arcade, but some of you think of the video game places that we used to go to before. Some people did before the pandemic. So you don't want to write arcade, you can just say rows of columns, right, and arches. Or you can say arches supported by columns. On either side of any Renaissance church, there'll be rows of columns which support arches, or you can just say columns and arches, of course. And then that leads to the third feature, a flat ceiling. That sounds odd. Gothic churches, of course, had peaked ceilings. I'm sure you've seen pictures, and we're going to cover those. No, that's right. We're not going to go into Gothic architecture. That was art 1.1 or 2.1. Just say the ceilings are flat in all Renaissance churches. Well, that's almost all Renaissance churches. So this church was a prototype for the Renaissance style churches throughout first Italy and then throughout Europe, and it's done by Brunelleschi, the first great Renaissance architect. There we go. That's the meaning. Let's do the full analysis and wrap it up. Completely symmetrical. I just said it was, but you know, what about the floor? Well, it's still symmetrical to me, left to right and top to bottom. But you could make the case that the floor is wider than the ceiling. So if you want to say it's unbalanced toward the bottom, that's fine. But because the floor is the widest section, I wouldn't argue with that. But it definitely is, by definition, it's symmetrical. So it's balanced left to right. The largest mass would be the floor, for the reason I just mentioned, then the ceiling, then the arches, and then the columns. Okay, for space, it's about a 70-foot high ceiling. One long open space. It's called a nave, but you don't need to know that word yet. We'll get to that next week. One long open space or aisle, you could even just say, right? But with two side aisles. And the ceiling is, the height of the ceiling is about 70 feet. That's the real space. There's no technique for modeling, just the shadows under the arches around the walls created by the sun. The colors are cool, aren't they? Cool gray and off-white, except on the ceiling, where they are gold painting. If you care, that's plaster. Gold paint creates a warm tone on just the ceiling. The rhythm is obvious. The columns, the arches, right? The windows, the tiles, lots of rhythm. The materials are all real, as is true of most architecture until the 20th century or late 19th century. And that would be real smooth. It's marble, by the way. You can just say stone, though. Real smooth stone, real smooth tile on the floor, real smooth glass in the windows, and real smooth plaster on the ceiling. Okay, and then let's see, is there, oh, dynamic or stable, we'll end with that one. Stable, of course, because of the flat roof on the ceiling and on the floor. I would argue that the columns are both, they're round, but they're tall and straight, so they're both stable dynamic. And the arches are clearly dynamic, so it's a mixture. Okay, any questions? I'll stick around for a few minutes for any questions anybody has about anything we covered or anything else in class that we have discussed so far. Anybody? Don't forget, if you aren't sure your mini bio got in, you can either email me to give you a confirmation. I read the names out at the beginning, but I think that wasn't recording. So if you want me to, I can double check right now. We have the list of people. I got about the 2/3 or more than 2/3 of the classes sent their mini bios to my, remember it goes to markw@aol.com. Why don't I repeat this list? Because it wasn't recording before, because we have about a dozen people that didn't join us today. So these are the people I still have not received in my AOL. It has to be that. If you send it somewhere else, I won't see it. AOL, Mark W, MARKW@AOL.com email. Fernanda Barajas, Jaro Barcenas, Jacob Dowling. I'll just do this quickly, and then any more questions, I'll stick around. Jack Ferris, Amy Hernandez, Parker Jacko, Jason Jones, Cara McKeith, Colton Miller, Paolo Nunez, Margot Pierce, Jessica Rosales, Leonor Sanchez, Angelina Solano, and then let's pick one more. Jackie Vargas, and Taylor Wimberly. It could be that you sent them. I don't doubt that if you remember sending them, but they somehow did not. They got to the wrong website where they weren't. Sometimes, I said this at the beginning, it wasn't recording, so I'll repeat it. There could be a confusion when you send something in under a different name, like you're using someone else's email or something, or if you sign your mini bio or your tagline on your email to me, even if you sent the right place, but your name is different than it is on the roster. So please double check if you heard your name. Resend it to me. That's the safest thing. Or just double check where you sent it and did you sign that with the name the way it is on the roster. Otherwise, I can't tell if you're really the same person. And that would be easy because you should have your proof of registration when you enrolled in this class, and it'll show you how the Office of Records and Admissions has you down. Sometimes they put your name differently than you use. It's just one of those anomalies. Okay, so if you heard your name read or someone's watching this as a video, please, if possible, before midnight on Monday, even sooner if you would, as soon as you can, of course, by the end of this week, resend or send, if you didn't already, to my Mark W at AOL, your mini bios. Okay, anybody else have any other questions about anything that we have already covered or something you wanted to know about? Okay, because next Monday we will proceed with perhaps the most famous painting of the early Renaissance that it would take so long to go over, I didn't have time to do it justice. And that's the wedding portrait with the couple holding hands in the early Renaissance painting. That's amazing painting, full of all kinds of misinterpretations. We'll clarify the correct meaning of that painting as our first slide on Monday, and then we'll go on into the later Renaissance, and we should be able to get up through Da Vinci, or at least get started on it. Da Vinci is one of the mid-Renaissance painters, and of course later Michelangelo, probably on Wednesday of next week. All right, anybody else have any questions about anything? Now's yes.
Yeah, so for your grading course, you have a capital mark, and then for your for your syllabus, it's a lowercase m. So I'm wondering, like, will it be sent to the same like email? Does it matter?
I'm sorry, for my which? Say it again.
So for your grading course policies, for your markaol.com, you have a capital M, and then for your syllabus one, you have it on mark.
Oh, it's all lowercase. Yeah, I think they all automatically do that anyway. The website.
Oh, maybe.
Well, it's a good question to clarify. Yeah, sure. No, it's all lowercase. I don't know if it looked different on one of my handouts, but don't worry about it, because even if you send it with the capital, it should go through. But just be extra thorough and make it all lowercase. Okay. All right. There we go. Well, now, any other questions from anybody else?
I have a question.
Sure.
I just want to clarify. You said you have an assignment that we can choose any book to read. Is it an extra credit?
No, not book, movie to watch.
Oh, okay. We can choose any movie.
About the light, not any movie. Sure. Let's clarify. It's under the extra credit options on the course policies. You want to read that, but I'm happy to tell you, I think you're maybe overlapping two different options. You can download one of the two art-themed novels I wrote. I've had these, approved by the administration because they are definitely related to the subject of this class. And they're on my handout, right? You have that in front of you, or do you? The course grading policies, because they're listed on there. One is a novel about Chicago in the early 60s and family of artists and immigration, racism, all kinds of issues that are still relevant today that I observed growing up in Chicago in the 60s. That is worth 15 points if you download it from Amazon Kindle. It's called the South Side Story. Very simple, South Side Story. And you'd see my name there. It was reviewed many times. If you choose to review it, you get 5 more points. If you download it, you'll have to show me the last chapter. That's the only way I know you downloaded the whole manuscript. And then if you send me a screenshot of that and you choose to write a review, doesn't matter if it's good, bad, or whatever you think of it, and post a review, you get 5 more points. So you could get up to 20 points by doing that on either of the two novels. The other one is called The Open House Murders, and that's an architecture-themed murder mystery. And that's set in the 90s in the Bay Area. So some of you may either recognize, or you would, some of you, the sites of the various bodies that appear and so forth. And that one is also worth 15 points to download. So those are the only books, and 5 points if you post a review on Amazon Kindle. That's one option. The only option with movies is a film about the life of an artist, or a documentary about an artist, an hour or longer. Write 2 pages about what you learned from that film or that documentary, and then email it to me.
Okay, a documentary about what?
The life of an artist. For instance, Van Gogh. There's so many movies, but the best one, I've been saying this for years, is Lust for Life. Literally, that's the title. 3 words, Lust for Life, about the life of Van Gogh. It's the first movie ever made about him, and it's still the best. It won like 5 Academy Awards. Deserved all of them. And you feel like you're actually watching Van Gogh go through what he went through to create his art. It's a very moving movie. It's about 2 hours long, but it doesn't seem that way. If you watch that and then you write what you felt that you learned from it, give me at least a page and a half, more like 2 pages. Send it to me. It's 10 points. And you could do that twice with 2 different movies or documentaries about the life of an artist. Yeah. Any artist. Okay. Sure. You're welcome. Anybody?
And are there due dates also on the handouts?
The only due dates are for the papers and exams, of course, and those are coming up to the 6th and 9th week. So I'm going to give you heads up. Next week, you're going to have a handout about how to, I meant to say that, but you'll see it in your inbox. It's a PDF on the one page on the requirements for your paper, 5 requirements. We'll go over them together in class. That won't take too long. And then we'll go right into the slides. That will be next week. And you'll see a sample of an A paper at the same time. I'll send those by, Friday probably. So look at that before the next lecture on Monday and have those with you. So if you have any questions, you can ask them then. But that still gives you 3 more weeks after that before the first due date. Week 6 is when it's all on the syllabus, by the way, all the deadlines. Of course, you keep up with the reading. That's every college class, right? You have to read a couple chapters a week, and that's always on each week's syllabus entry. So just keep up with the reading until the first paper's due. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else? Okay, because I do want to give everyone their maximum opportunity, since this is my only office hours, at least in live real time. Anybody else, one more time, has any questions about anything relating to assignments? Yeah.
That list of names you read a couple minutes ago, that was for the people who didn't turn in their bios, right?
Yes, it could be that you did and it didn't get to me because it went to a different website, or because your name wasn't the same as what's on my syllabus. So if that is the case, if you sent yours in and you heard your name, then resend it would be very, very specific about putting the name in the body of the email to me, saying this is my, I'm resending, and the name, the way your name appears on your registration. That's very important, the exact same, because otherwise I won't be sure if it's the right person. That happens.
Okay, good.
This message. So I hope that helps. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, because I didn't hear my name, so.
Then you're okay. Yeah. If you want me to double check, give me your last name and I'll tell you right now.
Oh, Clausen, CLAU.
Yeah, you're good. You're good.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Okay, is that it now? Have we covered everybody? One more time. Okay, you guys have a good rest of the week, good weekend, and look for those 2 PDFs that'll come to you over the next few days in your inbox, and print them out about how to write your papers. I'll see you all on Monday. Okay? Take care.
Thank
Bye.
you.
You're welcome. Bye. Okay, there we go.